Give it up for Tony Cimaglia. Make your way downtown. Make it to the crowd. Make it to the crowd. Awesome.
Said green was forward. All right, cool. How's everybody doing? Pretty good energy for 4:30, 4:45. So, full disclosure, I have never spoken at a conference before. This is a little terrifying, but I've got a good psychiatrist, I got good meds working in my favor, so I feel good about this today. I do want to just pause for a second. I just hit my 4-year mark in the tech industry. This whole situation, is absolutely wild to me. I've just been so grateful to be here. I'm really thankful that you're here to listen to what I have to say, even if you're just here to beat the heat from the OTP stage, which is understandable. And then, as you heard Crystal say, I'm a career switcher, so let's kick this off. So, first, I promise I'm not a narcissist, but the beginning of this is going to come off as like really self-aggrandizing, a little narcissistic, but I think it's really important that you understand my background so I can kind of paint a picture of that, so that I can tell you how I ended up in the restaurant industry in the first place, how I made the switch to tech, and then finally just like found the space to actually pursue this as a career, because I didn't have the option for a really long time. So the reason why I feel like my story is important is because it parallels a lot of other people that have switched careers. And I want you to look at like my struggles from the lens of I am a cis white dude, and there are systemic issues that make this easier for me than it would have been for anybody else. And I feel like I went through hell to get my first jobs, and I had to climb mountains, and it's even harder for everybody else. So if you take anything away from this talk, I just want you to see like how amazing, how driven, how talented career switchers are, and I hope you're gonna see their value and just try to help them enter the industry any way that you can. So 2 events kind of got me here today. So event number 1, I killed a car. So I was young, I was restless, I took a car off-roading, I didn't account for the amount of rain that we'd had recently, and took off across the puddle, and then it just dropped like a stone. So I lived in the suburbs, and I don't know how international the audience is, but life in the suburbs here without a car is pretty untenable. So it was either live without a car at 17 or find a job. So when you have no job, no experience, what do? And for me, it was you go flip burgers somewhere that you could walk to. So at that time, when I entered the restaurant industry, I had no idea that I was going to stay there for like a decade, but I did. So I was finishing high school, thought I wanted to be a chef. I got my head turned by, like, call them haters or elitists that didn't really think it was a valid career. So I kind of pressured myself to go back to school. I studied a bunch of different things, and then kind of fell in love with restaurant work while I was trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. So once I made that decision, that was what I was gonna do, I really leaned in, and I was running a bunch of different bars here in Atlanta, and then big event for me, number 2, was I went to a karaoke night on a random Monday, and I met the love of my life, and I was like absolutely done for. And then my speaker notes say like, y'all are supposed to go, oh man, that's great. And you might think this is just like totally a way for me to get brownie points with my wife, which it absolutely is. But this is the most important event in my life for multiple reasons, but the one that's relevant to this talk is that I had really good parents. but they like couldn't really grasp or handle like my struggles with bipolar and depression and anxiety, and they just didn't really get it. My wife is a nurse, her brother was bipolar, and she knew me. She was there to like look out for my best interests, my mental health, my physical health. She just had this unconditional belief in me that I could do anything, and we just sort of inspired each other to be the best versions of ourselves. Like, number one, this is like the first privilege that I have. It's like, some people never find this. So that was immensely helpful to me. So my future wife at the time and I are going through a stretch with our jobs where we're just like exhausted, we're miserable, we're underappreciated, we're being challenged in like all the wrong ways. And, sorry about that, a little late. We decided that we wanted to do something about it, and we wanted to change things. So she got a job helping people get lung transplants. It's like super important work. And I went to go run another bar. So didn't make a huge leap. But it was not just any bar. It was a bar at the best new restaurant in the country. And quick note, I would never seriously disparage PF chains. It bought me my first house. No bad things to say there. But yeah, back to Staple House, I mean, the food was just incredible, like unlike anything you'd ever seen. They were taking fish skin and turning it into pork rinds. They were making whipped cream out of beef fat. The environment was unbelievable. Just like customers are happy to be there. The staff was happy to be there. We were learning all the time. It was really challenging, and like I realized it was as high as I could go in that industry. Like there wasn't going to be a better restaurant to work at. And so obviously, I still speak really highly about this place. So there's a couple reasons that I left. First was my spine. When you can't walk up and down a staircase, and the restaurant that you work in has a staircase, you start to really question your career decisions. And then secondly, like I started to get bored. I really loved restaurant work, but like I loved the familiar nature of the industry, but there was these problems that I just couldn't escape no matter where I worked. And I thought Staple House was going to be the panacea to all those problems, and it wasn't. So, at this point, I feel like I'm at the top of my career, and I've got to start over and do something else. So how did I start over? I went to General Assembly's immersive program, Zero Coding Bootcamp. They're located all over the place. My wife was able to support me financially while I did that. And I used to say that this was like the hardest thing that I've ever done. And then I had twins. And it's harder. It's way harder. But yeah, I was terrified after I graduated from a boot camp that like nobody was gonna hire me. I had never finished a bachelor's degree. I got really lucky and I got a job before I graduated. And I worked there for like 2 months. The owner threw this lavish Kentucky Derby party on a Saturday, and then he shut the business down on Monday with no warning. So I had this like false start, had to start over. And like that experience afterwards is really why I'm here, because I went through hell trying to find another job. And like, I know that I'm privileged, and I still went through awful interview experiences. Like, people were condescending. They asked me questions for an entry-level job that they had no business asking. Everyone that went through my cohort at my coding bootcamp went through the exact same issues. And from like what I'm hearing from people that are going through these programs now, it's even worse. Like, it's even harder for them to find jobs. It's even harder for them to get interviews. A lot of the jobs just don't exist anymore. No one's hiring entry-level people. No one's training them up. They all want people with they all want mid-levels. They want people with years of experience. But eventually, like, I did figure it out. Worked a bunch of different places. Found my way to MailChimp. So that's me. And at this point, you're like, I literally know this guy's life story. Like, where is he going with all this? Why does he want me to hire a bartender? And I'm having trouble with these slides, so I apologize. So yeah, you right now, why does he want me to hire a bartender? That's not supposed to be there. All right, seriously? This is why you should hire a bartender. 4 years ago, I didn't have any other professional skills. And now I'm a senior engineer at this company that I always wanted to work for, about to start as an engineering manager on Monday. And I am not a savant. There were people in my cohort that just like terrified me because they picked this up so quickly and they had such an aptitude for it. This has not come easily to me. I've had to work very hard to understand how to write software. And my success since getting into tech has had little to do with the technical experience, and it's had way more to do with those experiences that I gained in the restaurant industry. So my point is just that like the people who are coming into this field with prior industry experience from anywhere, they have most of the skills that people who go straight to CS school and graduate have to learn on the job. And on a product team, those are the skills that are usually the most important, because you're not necessarily just writing code. So that's why you should hire a bartender. Those skills are what have made me effective. On product teams, I'm talking to VPs who have no engineering experience. I am working with designers and trying to explain to them what's going to be feasible or possible to actually execute from a design. I meet with content people, I meet with marketers, support staff, product owners who have varying degrees of like technical and non-technical skills. And you have to be able to work cross-functionally with people who have different areas of expertise, varying levels of knowledge and technology, and that is just a totally different skill set than knowing big O notation or knowing the nuances of a programming language. And it's usually irrelevant to every meeting that you're in with those peers. All right, so like what are some of these specific soft skills that I came in with that I think made me effective? So communication-wise, I don't know if you've met some younger people these days, but when I was young, I couldn't look somebody in the eye before I worked in restaurants. I was like horribly shy, I hated interacting with people, but when you're behind a bar, you have to convey information to tons of people under really stressful circumstances. You're on display all the time, there's nowhere to hide. Miscommunications in that industry also mean just like lighting money on fire. Or feeling your soul die a little bit because you had to throw away a perfectly good steak because the temperature was wrong. Worst case, you're sending somebody to the hospital because somebody didn't understand food allergy, somebody didn't communicate that to the kitchen. And in tech, you get really good, or in restaurants, you get really good at making sure that everybody's on the same page. And you're not missing details, and if something's unclear, you're clarifying what the requirements are. If there's a big issue and you think you might, miss the start of service or something, you raise your hand early and you let people know ahead of time what's going on. All that is translated directly over. So attention to detail. I don't think unless you've done the job, I don't think there's any way you know how many little tiny things a bartender has to keep an eye out for. You are like watching dozens of people, like a half-inch difference in the level of a glass is the difference between like asking that person if they want another round or not. And you're just trying to juggle that along with making drinks for the entire restaurant. So, and we do this all the time in engineering, right? Like, we have to be able to spot things that a linter is not going to catch, like how an exception might bubble up, or an edge case. We, try to avoid switching contexts, but a lot of times it's just unavoidable. Something pops up in bug snag, and you have to go look into it immediately after you've been working on a hard problem all day. You have to be able to juggle multiple problems in your head. It's just key to the job. All right, so synthesizing and presenting information. I used to create drink menus, used to create wine lists. I used to, tell people how that stuff is going to match up with food. And I would have to distill that info down and explain it to people from different cultures, different backgrounds, people who, never eaten some of the food that they were eating before. I would have to teach myself about a new liquor product if it came in, having never seen or heard it before. And then all of a sudden I'm the subject matter expert on this thing, and I have to be able to teach the whole staff about it. And this is also what we do in tech all the time. We build out technical specs. We're presenting them to peers. We're showing it to different audiences. We're not always even sure who's going to end up looking at something and find it useful down the road. We get sent on research missions about a competitor's API or emerging technologies that we think we might need to utilize in the future, and it's on us to present those findings. All right, so hiring and mentorship. I mean, this is just like a straight up one-to-one carryover. Like, and when I worked in restaurants, I interviewed people, I hired staffs, I stood up restaurants, I trained, I taught, I mentored, just all of it is carried over, Restaurants are usually pretty small teams too, so even like kind of the size of the group that you work in, it's been really similar. The specifics methods that you're using to teach people about this stuff are different, content's different, but it's almost exactly the same. All right, and then persuasion. As a bartender, there's no way around the fact that you're just a salesperson. And I sold the hell out of some wine to people in my time. My livelihood was dependent on it. If I could convince somebody to spend more money, that was more money I had for my wife or my kid. And selling wine has translated into convincing an entire engineering department to adopt a new documentation system, or packaging up blue work that we need done to hit a release for another team in a way that's palatable to them, and they're actually going to want to do it. And then I think, kind of last but not least, you have to convince your product owners all the time that working on tech debt is really important, equally as important as pushing new features. And generally, you just have to convince people that you have good ideas, or you won't get buy-in for anything that you do. All right, so I know I've alluded to this already, but I'm obviously not just talking about bartenders at this point. I'm talking about all career switchers. So people who had to start working in high school because they needed to support their parents or their siblings, people who never had the option to go to college, people who got a film degree and never used it, teachers who were making pennies and decided that they finally wanted to get paid. It's like a valid reason to do this work. People who've gone to coding boot camps, and especially people who taught themselves how to code, because that is so much of the job, is being able to teach yourself new information. They can do anything, those people. And then, I can't even imagine the talent that people have from other industries that I'm not really familiar with and come into this industry with. All right, so kind of like some of these things that they just bring to teams, they bring to organizations, how many people here have switched careers? Cool. All right, my people are here, that's good. You know how much is involved in doing this. It is beyond hard. It's a massive decision, nobody takes it lightly. But you vet any new career. If you're thinking about switching careers, you really vet it. You really make sure that it's something that you're going to want to do for a long time, because you don't want to find yourself in the same situation. You want to make sure that it's something that drives you and it makes you want to get out of bed every day. You want to get in front of the computer and actually do it. And also, you might just want to get paid. And again, totally valid reason to switch into tech. From a diversity standpoint, closing the wealth gap, most of the people that graduate from boot camps, and this is going to skew more towards boot camp graduates just on the statistics side because it exists, it's out there, it's a little bit fuzzier to find people who just switched in general. But people who graduate from boot camps have immediately a 56% salary uplift. So you're just closing this wealth gap immediately by hiring these people. Typical CS grads are 20% women, and boot camp grads, those numbers have just gone up, and in 2020 it was 40%. Racially, boot camps are still mimicking the tech industry, pretty much exactly, down to a 0.5 percentage point, which is definitely an area where they can improve. But if your company says that they care about diversity, equity, and inclusion, they better be hiring career switchers. And not just people who have already proven that they can do the job and that have experience, but they better be taking flyers on people that don't have the professional experience and hiring junior roles and making it possible for them to learn the skills that they don't have. All right, easing your hiring woes. Has anybody heard that it's hard to hire people right now? Is this an issue that anybody's having? Yeah, I mean, this would just immediately increase talent pools, you know? It's not that hard to hire people and to train them and to get them up to speed on what you're doing, especially if you have a large staff of experienced engineers who are decent mentors. All right, and then towards the end here, like, what are some things that you can do to help hire a bartender? So like, honestly, just being here at this conference, I've been beyond encouraged by like some of the conversations I've had with people that are already working in the industry. You know, I've met a bunch of people here who are trying to break in for the first time. There's a ton of optimism around it. I feel like most of us know this. Like, I don't feel like this is new information for a lot of people, but I don't feel like the companies we work for know this stuff. And I'm gonna pick on Microsoft for a second, because they've never called me back on any of my applications. But I talked to somebody about some roles that got posted at Microsoft, and they were for his team, and they basically said everybody has to have a CS degree requirement. And he said, why? They're like, well, that's just what we do. And he's like, I don't have that. Can I still work here? So I think at this point, we've got these large companies that have said, like, you don't have to have a CS degree to work here anymore. And they're either copying and pasting job descriptions and they haven't removed these requirements, or like they're kind of full of shit and they need people to put pressure on them. And it'd be like, definitely there's been some strides made in the right direction from the CS requirement standpoint, but if you're at a company and you have if you have CS degree requirements on your job postings, just nuke them. Like, just get rid of them today. Maybe not in all cases. You're building like generalized AI and you want to hire somebody with a PhD in like deep learning, probably a good idea. Like, avoid a Skynet situation. But like, I just don't know why this is still a thing. You know, companies are just shooting themselves in the foot and limiting their talent pool to a less diverse group of people. And you're kind of, in a sense, punishing people who didn't have their life figured out when they were 18 years old, or people who were just curious to try something new because they got bored of their current career. You know? Anyway. So, a couple of things besides the degree requirements. Does anybody know what demo days are? Yeah, so coding boot camps do this thing where their cohorts graduate. They're usually like every 3 months or so. But you basically just get to tour a room with, you know, a group of people who didn't know how to write software 90 days earlier and have put together full stack applications in a couple weeks by themselves. And some of the stuff they built is cooler than anything I have ever built in 4 years in this industry. They're amazing, and they're all just waiting to be hired. They're all just waiting for their first job. And then apprenticeships, I think, are really interesting. And I think the size of your company can kind of limit what you can do with this. But MailChimp has an apprenticeship program that's been around for, I think, like close to a decade. But we let people who work outside of the engineering department start working with engineering teams and start learning the skills that they need. And some of the most brilliant engineers that I work with at MailChimp have come from customer support. Actually, the most brilliant engineer I've worked with there so far. I was like the first person to go through the apprenticeship program. I mean, he just gives me a huge sense of imposter program. Support people know the staff better than anybody. Anybody at the executive level, any of the engineers, they understand the customer problems better than everybody else. They're just phenomenal. And finally, this is gonna kind of run, one of these will run counter to helping career switchers, but I did some work with the Microsoft TEALS program this last school year, and if you have 4 or 5 hours a week to do it, you should absolutely get involved. Basically, they go in, they take you to a high school somewhere in the US where the demographics in the high school are from backgrounds that are underrepresented in tech, and you're there to teach the students CS, but in addition to CS, you're there to teach the students CS You're there to actually teach the teacher how to take over that class in the future. So you might be with them for a semester or a couple years, but you're creating a sustainable program at high schools that didn't have computer science programs previously for the people that have never been exposed to it. And last but not least, RefCode, founded by Brenton, who used to work at MailChimp, but the crew's back there. Y'all should talk to them while you're here this week. They are a really cool organization. They support immigrants and refugees and just their journey into their programming careers. And I think one of the things I really like about that differs from what boot camps do, is they kind of let people get a feel for it and just see like if they have an aptitude for this and if this is something that they enjoy before they're committed to something for months and months. All right, and then the last thing I want to do is just shout out the Giving Kitchen, which has nothing to do with tech, but the last restaurant I worked for in the restaurant industry was a for-profit, but it was a subsidiary of the Giving Kitchen. But they're based here. Basically, they support restaurant workers who are in need. So if they get hurt, if they get sick, they need to get, they don't have insurance, like they don't have vacation time. They foot their bills basically until they can get back on their feet, they can get back at work. So it's just a really phenomenal organization here that I've been involved with for a while. So if you have time while you're in the city, please look it up. And that's pretty much everything I have. Thank you all so much. Please hire some great pitchers.